Well, welcome everybody. It's so wonderful to see you here, and Happy New Year. We haven't seen you since the new year came in. We're hoping that it's going to be a safer, better, stronger, more family togetherness and friends together year. And we know everybody has been having a rough time. 2020 has been very difficult for many of us, and we're grateful that you're back with us again. And I'm Gabi Conacher. I am co-founder of Wishes for Elliot and Deep Connections, this project which really aims to help families who have children with severe epilepsy learn more about the space, connect with experts, learn from other families. So today, we are touching on SUDEP, which is a tough subject, we know, and we're glad that you're here to discuss with us, because the more we talk about it, the more we know. And I think you'll hear a wide range of experiences today from our families joining us. And this is part 3 in the series, just to be aware. The first one was kind of more about what do we know about SUDEP, and we had Vicki Whittemore from NIH and Sam Latou from the SUDEP Center for SUDEP Research. And then the second one was about what we can do. So we were talking about devices and talking about, we had, a doctor on talking about, the kind of questions you could be asking and different resources and a number of different things. So at this point, what we're really turning towards now is focusing on the family perspective. And we're really thrilled to have this panel with us today to walk us through their experiences, their fears, their trauma, their stories, and what they've learned and what they wish they knew. And we're really thrilled that today is going to be moderated by Sally Schaeffer, who's the director of the SUDEP Institute at the Epilepsy Foundation. So I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away, Sally.
First, I have to unmute myself so you can actually hear me. So thank you so much, Gabi, for and Deep Connections and everyone associated with your organization, Wishes for Elliot, for having these conversations about SUDEP. This is the third, as you mentioned, in your series, and you've really provided some good content on a very scary and uncomfortable topic. But I like that you're giving these resources and education to everyone. It's so important, even though it is really a hard topic. People can be better prepared and understand and ask the right questions and have the tools in their toolbox, right? So I am so thankful that you are doing this and that you've asked to partner together to make this happen. So thank you so much, so important. I am Sally Schaeffer, as Gabi mentioned, the Senior Director of the SUDEP Institute, a program within the National Epilepsy Foundation. And my role is really to bring awareness, education, support and drive research to end SUDEP, as well as help the bereaved. And many of the women that you see on this conference call are women that I have met through my work with the SUDEP Institute. Amazing women that I am excited to have here today to talk about this tough topic, and I'm so thankful for them to be here. As far as my own journey with SUDEP, I was blessed with a little girl in 2007. Her name is Lydia, and she was soon diagnosed with a rare chromosome disorder, and soon after that diagnosed with epilepsy. The epilepsy progressed, and she had intractable epilepsy, and it was also an aggressive rare form of epilepsy called ESES, or electrical status epilepticus in sleep. So she was actually in essence seizing over 80% of her non-REM sleep. With her rare chromosome disorder, it was really hard to tackle these seizures. In typical children, sometimes ESES can be managed, but we kind of had the odds against us with the rare chromosome disorder. I fought with all my might, heart, and soul, because she is my child, and as parents, that's what we often do. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to ultimately save her. And on Mother's Day, May 11th in 2014, she died in her bed. And that has led me to this career path and what I've been doing and supporting others, educating others, and obviously here in this seat today. So my daughter is definitely a driving force behind supporting others and helping others. enough about my story. I want to invite these women on this panel here to talk about theirs. What we want to do is empower you with information. We want to lift you up because although this is a very hard and scary topic, with information and empowerment, you are better equipped to help your loved one or yourself, depending on who is listening to this. And that is really the goal around this webinar. Not at all to scare you, not at all to bring fear, but I hope you leave feeling inspired by these women. I hope you, and many of them with husbands, right? So we don't want to discount the husbands in this land because they are there also fighting in whatever way, but it just happens to be women today. But we want you to feel inspired. We want you to feel strengthened, and we want you to feel empowered. I always say that I could have folded. I could have taken my daughter's death and said, I'm done, she's gone. But I didn't because I wanted to be there to help other people. If one more life is saved because I had my voice, that is what is important to me. And I know that's the case with all these other women right here. And so I am honored to be in their presence. I am humbled to be in their presence. They are amazing in their own right. And I want to introduce you to them right now. So we're going to start. I'm just going to go around on my screen. They're going to, in about 5 minutes, share with you a little bit about their journey. And then after their journey, we're going to loop back and we're going to talk about what they knew about SUDEP, what they didn't know about SUDEP, and how they're helping bring education to SUDEP. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Teresa Elder to give her, to introduce herself and share a little bit about her journey with epilepsy.
Unmute myself. Hi, I'm Teresa Elder. My son Tommy is 28 years old. He has had epilepsy since he was 6 months old. He was developing normally till he was about 6 months, and then he started having myoclonic seizures that I didn't even know were seizures because I had never even seen a seizure before. He developed into a lot of different seizure types, a lot of status epilepticus. He's been in and out of the hospital a lot in his 28 years. He has been actually on a ventilator 49 times in 28 years. Last year, he ended up having to get a trach. And our journey has been, a lot of the people that I talk to have a lot of younger children, but back 28 years ago, there was no social networking, there was no Google, there was no, the doctor couldn't say, hey, this 28 letter word, and then you go run to your phone and look it up. We didn't have access to that. We didn't have networking, and it seemed like we were the only ones in the hospital with seizures all the time. Everybody else had some other diagnosis or some other issue. And now things are totally different in a good way, because you can network with people, you can research groups on Facebook or on the internet and find similar, not to get diagnosis, but let's face it, sometimes talking to other parents or people that have the same issues gives you at least a path to follow. And so I kind of, developmentally, Tommy's like a toddler. He still functions at like a 3 to 5 year old level. He's nonverbal. So he runs around the house playing with wooden peg puzzles and balls, and we had to get his strength back. He was in the hospital for 45 days last year, and he pretty much lost everything he had. He's pretty much back to his baseline now, which is, toddler playing with puzzles, watching Sesame Street. And my biggest thing is every time he had a new procedure, when he got a VNS, we had to learn that. Then he got a G-tube, and I had to learn that. And I feel like every time I feel like I get a grip on something, he gets something new. So it's always like last year, the trach. And that was a big one because, it's pretty big procedure, and he was in the hospital for so long. And now I feel like I can remember in the hospital telling the nurse, I'm never going to learn this. I'm never going to be able to handle this trach. And she said, yes, you will. And then he was hospitalized again in November last year, and the trach nurse came in to change the dressing and do whatever she does. And she just looked at, we both had masks on, of course, but she just looked at me and we could tell we were just laughing at each other because she said, I told you would learn it. And that's what you have to do. You have to just learn. And that's kind of become my mantra. Like, you have to educate yourself, you have to advocate. And sometimes advocating makes you seem like a mean person, but because the other person doesn't understand what you're asking for. Nobody that isn't in our shoes can understand, just as I can't understand losing my child, even though I know it's a possibility and I worry about it all the time, Sally would tell you. But every seizure he has, the first thing I think is this the last one? But all I can do is educate myself. And I think the SUDEP Institute and all these other foundations do a great job of networking. And the thing about fear is, of course, we're fearful of it, but you can't ignore what, just because you don't like it. Sort of like if you go out and spend 20,000 on your visa, and I'm not comparing a visa bill to a child, but I'm just saying you can't just, when you get the bill, you can't just say, oh, I don't want to look at that, I'm not going to open it. You still have to deal with it. It's just kind of the same situation. Like, I know that that's a possibility. And to me, the only option I have is to educate myself and learn as much as I can and do as much as I can to prevent that. And networking and talking to these other ladies and working with the SUDEP Institute is the way that we do it. So we just kind of take one day at a time and roll with it.
And a little bit about Teresa, that she's being very humble right now about herself, is that Tommy went into the hospital near the beginning of COVID, where as an adult man, which I know Teresa said you hear a lot about children, but as an adult man, they did not want her to accompany him in. So she worked with our advocacy team, as well as she had her own little powerhouse. She's her own little powerhouse right there, but she knew the CEO of the hospital and she had all the information, and she really was a strong advocate to make sure she could be the voice for Tommy. And it wasn't easy. And there was a short stint, very short stint, that she was not by his bedside, but it was short because she advocated for herself. The other thing she's being very humble about, and Teresa, I hope I can share this, is that when he got his trach in, they wanted to put him in a long-term nursing care. And Teresa said, absolutely not. I want my son home with me. And as you can imagine, learning the trach and having him home in her environment is a large, very large undertaking. Teresa works full-time. She's a full-time employee, and she wanted him home. So she's being very humble in this, but I admire her strength and her courage and her perseverance, resilience, and advocacy for her son. It is amazing, and one of the strongest mothers I know.
Thank you, Sally. They wanted to put him in the residential long-term care rehab place, and they went to the top of the place to ask, could I go? And they said no, because of COVID. And this was May of last year. And I said, then he's not going. And so they came in with the papers for me to sign for him to transfer, and I wouldn't sign them. And because I was his legal guardian, they couldn't send him unless I signed the papers. And I mean, I had some doctors pretty mad at me. Oh, well, but just on a side note, yesterday I was on a House in the state of Virginia. The House committee just passed all the way through the House. So it's headed to the Senate now. A new law we already have a law in place now during COVID, but after the COVID emergency, we're going to have, hopefully if it passes the Senate, also we'll have a law in place post-COVID that disabled adults can always have what they call a designated support person, because you can't be classified as a visitor because you're not one. But if they call you a visitor, you fall within that visitor policy. And if they put a kibosh on visitors, then they could ban you from coming in. But we're working with a lot of different agencies. And luckily my delegate here in Springfield is very good. And when I was stuck not getting in the hospital last year, she was going to work and get me in. But Sally said, when I was on the way to the hospital, I was texting the CEO saying, help. And he did. But not everyone has that, right. Not only the connections, but I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. Right. So that's just what I've learned you have to do. I'm sure.
Well, and Teresa's been behind the driving force of a few legislative actions in Virginia, not just this one. I don't know if you're behind this one that you mentioned, but she's been a driving force. So she's a great resource if she has time.
What's that?
But thank you, Teresa, so much for your story. We're not done with you, because you have more information about SUDEP that I know you've shared with me. But I would like to move on to Edana and have her share a little bit about her journey with epilepsy and SUDEP as well.
So good evening. First, as you can see on the screen, I'm not Sally number 2. She helped me get in. So into the Zoom, but I thought that was just, it's okay. So my journey. We have 3 children, and our youngest child is Kayla Perry, and she was born on May 9th, 1991, and she happens to also share her dad's birthday. So her and her dad born on May 9th. Somewhere around age 11, Kayla was diagnosed with epilepsy. And the epilepsy that she was diagnosed with was juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. And for those who may not be aware of what that is, it is when your limbs jerk, your arms, your legs, and her epilepsy also was triggered by lack of sleep. And getting the diagnosis was a shock. No one in the family had epilepsy. And after my husband and I got over the shock of it, we're people of faith. And so we were like, well, whatever we need to do, we will do to ensure Kayla has, a quality of life that we can provide, so that she was able, to do just about whatever she wanted to do. She sang in the choir. She did gymnastics. She also played soccer, was a very good soccer player. And she loved music and had a beautiful voice. And she also sang with a community choir called the Washington Performing Arts Society. And she had the opportunity to sing for Obama in 2009. So from all intents and purposes, our family adjusted, which meant, we were paying attention to when Kayla went to sleep. We watched, her medicines. We, got on her nerves when she became a teenager, that she just couldn't do everything everybody could do. If she wanted to go out on Saturday, she'd have to be in Friday night to get a rest. Whenever she would go over her friend's house, we had to make sure the families were prepared for what would go on. And so her community, her family, her friends, everyone was, a part of Kayla's support group. Kayla was able to go to college. She got her associate's degree. So as far as we're concerned as her family, we had researched everything about epilepsy. We knew what we needed to know, but we did not know about SUDEP. We had a great relationship with her juvenile, her pediatric neurologist, a very good relationship for about 10 years. And then when she became an adult, we had a great relationship with a major hospital here in the DC area, but not once was SUDEP brought up in our conversations, because I probably still have bags of information on medications, on, their effects, what to expect when moving into teenagehood and, dealing with epilepsy, all these pamphlets, but not one on SUDEP. So fast forward in 2016.
Edana, I hate to jump in here, but can you just share what your background is, your educational background, your career background is?
Sure, sure. So I am actually in healthcare myself. Thank you. And so I have worked for the longest in business development with physicians. Like I have friends in, as physicians, we constantly, I'm sorry. Okay. And I have worked in hospitals, I've worked in physician practices. So healthcare is not something I'm uncomfortable with. I have been in hospitals, worked in the emergency department. And so all those things, the idea of health and death is normal. So once Kayla, in 2016, that was the first time Kayla felt comfortable enough for us to do the epilepsy walk in DC. And at that time, she was 25. And I would say too, that one of the things that I have found is that a lot of times kids and young adults, there's shame associated with epilepsy because of the fact that kids, will fall and have their seizure. And so my daughter, really would only let her really close friends know that she had epilepsy. So us going to the walk was a big deal. That was like a coming out of, you know what, I'm comfortable now with it. And I mention that because as we're walking and finishing the walk, my husband and I and our two granddaughters, I remember walking by the SUDEP booth and looking and saying, SUDEP, I wonder what that is. I never stopped, but in my ignorance, I thought SIDS, SIDS. Oh, that must be something relating to infants, right? That was my ignorance. So I never followed up and went over to the booth. A year later, me and my husband come home on the day of our anniversary, July 6th, after going to dinner, and we come home and Kayla had passed in her bed. And that shook our world. We live with the truth that Kayla could fall, have a seizure, and die. But we never anticipated that she would have a seizure in her bed while she was asleep. And so after that, of course, in addition to being hurt and confused and angry, I felt I needed some answers. And so I began right with the doctors. I called the department, spoke with the educational coordinator, and she referred me to our actual physician. And I had to be honest with him. I said, first of all, I'm not calling because I'm angry at you. I'm not trying to seek I have no malice. At this point, I am a person of faith, and I understand when it's your time, it's your time. But I don't understand why we weren't told this. We would leave your office with pamphlets. What's going on? Why didn't we know? And, he was honest, and he said, our community struggles with this decision about sharing SUDEP, and that there are half of us who feel comfortable with sharing SUDEP, but there's another half of us that don't. And I said, to be honest with you, I can't speak for anybody else, but if I already live with the possibility that my daughter could have a seizure by falling out, what difference is it for you to also tell me about another risk and let us deal with and determine how to use that information? And I said, I will commit myself to spreading the information about SUDEP and sharing. But I told him, I said, that's not something that we would want to have been held back from us. And that I don't think it's fair to hold it back from families. And part of that too, I think from a physician perspective is they don't have the answer. They don't have the answer. So they don't want to share the fact that this is a possibility and we don't know what to do, other than, sleep, take your medications and all of that. So, so with that.
And to add to that, Edana, I think it's even harder. And Gabi, I think you can concur, and Teresa, it's even harder for physicians to talk about it when you have something like intractable epilepsy, right? When you have an epilepsy that's uncontrolled by medications and you just keep trying new ones and it's not stopping. So
yeah. So so as a result of that, and I also had this thought too, I'll share with you before I stop talking, and I think I've shared this with Sally. As parents, generally when our kids are little, as they grow up, part of our job is to minimize their risk, right? They toddle, they move around, we move things away to keep them safe. And so when I think of SUDEP and not knowing, I think of that. I'm like, you should have told me so that I knew this risk. Because it's up to us to determine if one of us going to sleep in the room with her, if we're going to get her a special monitor, if we're going to take turns doing certain things. And I believe every family has that right to make that decision. But when you don't have the whole picture, how can you make decisions about what's best for your family? So as I close, we decided that we would turn our morning into mission. And so we created the Kayla Ross Perry Memorial Foundation. And part of our mission is to spread the word about epilepsy and SUDEP with programs that we provide about creative arts. We also provide scholarships. And so we are hoping that if one more person finds out, then maybe we've done our job to spread the word, and maybe one other family can have their family member a little longer. So I thank you.
Thanks, Edana, for sharing about Kayla. You're another force to be reckoned with. These families here are amazing. And I want to make sure we get to Danielle before we just have our casual conversation. Danielle, if you know, a lot of times we talk about parents, right? That there's parents on these calls. And I asked you to be here because of your unique force behind you for someone special in your life who is your brother. So it was a sibling. It's a different relationship, but yet you love the love that you have when you talk about him is so amazing. So I want to share from a sibling perspective as well, because I think different perspectives are so important here. I know when my daughter was diagnosed with her rare chromosome disorder, and then when she died, immediately my thoughts went to my other children and how I could help them through this and how I could help them function and grow and not have this affected at some point later in their life. So I know you and I have talked about your brother. So if you would share a little bit about your journey as a sibling, and you can share any feelings and emotions that your parents have had too, and even has the relationship changed with your parents since his death, or how has it changed, or how has it changed them? So thanks, Danielle, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And I had to catch my breath a couple times during both of your stories, because it's like you're speaking exactly what I'm feeling, both Teresa and Edana. So it's really nice to be here. So as Sally said, my brother, Josh Garcia, passed away just over 4 years ago, actually January 23rd, 2017. He was 36 years old. He had his first seizure when he was 19. I remember the day so vividly. We're about 3 years apart. So I was 16 and just driving in our neighborhood, and he had crashed his car. And, you know, this was before cell phones. And so my mom and dad and I went to where it happened, and the police had to break his window to make sure he was okay. But we had no idea what happened, because this was his first seizure, and definitely not something we thought would, result in ultimately his passing. So that one, we felt, you know, I guess backing up a bit, Josh and I were the closest brother and sister. I always say that. And then, you know, my cousins, my friends tell me, and him and I were kind of like split souls in the way that I could think about him and my phone would ring, or he'd think about, you know, we had this like innate sense that we could connect with each other. And even if it was weeks that we hadn't spoken to each other, when we'd talk, we'd find out that we're doing the same thing, or we felt the same way. And I always felt like I had a partner for life in my brother, and he was my first friend, and the person that I kind of did everything as a kid because of. He played soccer, so I thought I'd play soccer. He would do something, so I thought I could do it. And he always instilled a confidence in me that, you know, I kind of can't put into words, but so seeing him in a state that wasn't of strength, that there was, you know, what is this? I'm not used to Josh not being, you know, healthy and strong. And so his first seizure was scary for me and my mom and my dad. And we were just kids. So thinking back, that was obviously a lifetime ago. But from there, he had about 5 seizures a year. He went a 3-year stretch without having 1 seizure. But every single time he had one, I will always remember the tone in my mom's voice when she would call me. And I just knew as soon as she said, Josh, I knew he had a seizure. And to Edana, to your point, we did always live with the fear that he might have an accident or something terrible would happen where, you know, God forbid, he'd be driving his car or he'd fall and hit his head, or something would happen in a tragic sense like that. But SUDEP was never something that we knew about or talked about. His battle with epilepsy was it went up and down. He tried many different medications. He changed his lifestyle habits. He was one of the strongest people. I mean, he was 6'2", solid muscle, very fit, took care of himself. But the way some of the medications would affect him, he didn't feel like himself. And we all didn't like seeing Josh not being Josh. And he had a spark about him and a zest for life that sometimes when he would take his medicine, that just wouldn't be there. And it was really sad in the way that, you know, he used to tell us that he didn't feel like he wasn't himself. He felt like he had a fog when he would take some medication. So different medications were tried, the dosages were changed, and it never really changed that pattern of about 4 seizures a year. My dad actually has a log of every seizure he had, because we researched, we tried to figure out what was it? Was it, you know, was it sleep? Was it food? Was it, you know, what was it? And there was never one thing. But Josh being, I guess I'd say, the competitive and dedicated person that he was, similar to Edana, to your daughter, we felt like we were facing it and we were going to get through it together. And Josh left behind a wife, Christina, and 2 children. When Josh passed away, his son Elias was 3.5 and his daughter Liliana was 4 months old. So we all came together as a family, including my husband and my 2 girls, that this was just, it was a challenge, and it was something that we were going to get through. We were going to figure out, and we were going to do what was best for Josh. But never did I ever imagine that I would get a call on that Monday in January that he was found. Like, just the word found it sticks with me, that you know, I always thought, as Josh's friend and as his sister, I would be honest with him about anything. And I could say things to him that, you know, we'd always say, we're not going to be those siblings that don't talk about, you know, how we really feel. And like, we'll never fight. We love each other no matter what. And I might get mad at you, but no matter what, we're going to be honest and we're going to always be close. And if I would have heard anything about SUDEP, I would have brought it up to him, but I didn't know about SUDEP. And my parents' feelings and his wife's feelings, of course, were of being protective and making sure that nothing happened to him. And I was the same, but I was always researching, you know, different diets and different things he could do. And I have no regrets about my time with my brother and being his sister. And, you know, I don't think he didn't think we, you know, weren't doing all we could. But the one thing I do always think of is, why didn't I ever come across this when I was trying to search for what to do or potential risks? I never came across this. And I really just wish I would have known. Again, same thing you were saying, not that it would have changed anything. And our family is very, very faithful. And we know that this was, you know, God's plan, and he is in a better place. Although selfishly, we wish he was here. I wish that we knew more about it. And although I'm not a parent, my heart still hurts very deeply that my brother isn't still here and that he's not here for his kids and his wife and my daughters, for his nieces and everyone else. But I just want to make sure that, you know, by doing this, I just want to bring some light to the topic. And I want the sibling relationship also to be highlighted a bit, just because it's a relationship that you think will be with you the rest of your life, and that you'll go through the rest of your life with your brother or your sister. And I don't want any other brother or sister to feel the way that I've felt. So that's my story, and that's why I'm here today. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Danielle. You know, so many of you ladies covered a little bit of what you've done since your loved one has passed, or Teresa, what you do Teresa, you're one we haven't covered yet, just because, you know, Tommy is still thankfully with us today. Edana, you talked about how you started the foundation and how you bring in education. You're giving scholarships to people who are interested in the arts. And Danielle, you've contacted the SUDEP Institute and said, what can I do to make a difference? You're a SUDEP ambassador in California, making sure that people who have passed are remembered. So you ladies are the courage that you have, that what you've done with it. I just want to jump to Teresa for a minute though, because I want to talk about, and we're going to jump back to Edana and Danielle too. I know we have about 15 minutes, but Teresa, having Tommy here, and you and I have talked that you don't hear a lot about SUDEP either. And obviously it's something you're fearful of and you're aware of because he has, you know, intractable epilepsy. So tell me, as a mom, what have you done? And I know the answer to this, but
I hope I do.
Tell people here who are also fearful of it and wondering about it, and their doctor's not talking about it. Tell us what you have done to bring this topic into light in medical situations that you are in with Tommy, because I think that's the thing. If the doctors are going to talk about it, we have to bring it up. I knew about SUDEP before my daughter died. I knew about it, but I never spoke about it. I knew about it. I never said, hey, is there anything we can do to alleviate this? I never asked the question. I just knew it could happen. But you've been a little force when it comes to this topic. And I would love for you to share that.
I hope I know the right answer. Sometimes I just feel like I'm spinning and I do this. Sometimes I feel like I'm running around putting fires out, or in a phrase, but I'm not sure if you know this, but when Tommy was younger, you know, when he had his first seizure, they told me, don't call 911. You just need to call his pediatrician. the next day he seized, and it was over 6 minutes. And I was like, and 6 minutes, as you know, seems like an hour. And I finally told my husband, I don't care what they said, we're calling 911. And we ended up in the hospital. And I thought they were going to give him some medicine and then he'd be normal, like function like everyday life. And then finally, the doctor was just wanting to add medicine. And so I found a different doctor, and because I wasn't comfortable with that one, and I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I kind of feel like it's the same thing with SUDEP. If you don't have a doctor that's willing to be open, and not to discredit the other ladies who didn't even know about it, but if you know about SUDEP and you bring it up to your doctor and he's not willing to at least discuss it, and I think Edana hit the nail on the head when she said, because they don't know what to say. But I found another pediatric neurologist, and I remember asking him, well, what's he going to be like when he's like 13? Well, first they told me he wasn't going to live past 3. And then what's he going to be like when he's like a teenager? And he said, we don't know. And he would never even, and now looking back, I know he didn't know because the kids with his disorder didn't live that long. And he didn't know what to say. So he just said he didn't know. The doctor we have now actually does seminars on SUDEP, but only because it's become such, the Epilepsy Foundation and Sally's group has done such a good job with getting the information out there and making it, making the importance known that people need to know about this. Like the other ladies said, if you had known, you would have been able to make better decisions for the family, or you would have been able to offer your brother other, information. But I make a point to bring it up every time I'm at the doctor, because I want to make sure that they're telling other families about it, because I guess I kind of knew about it, but I didn't know that's what it was called. And I didn't know, I knew about it because that one doctor kind of alluded to the fact he may not live past 13, but I just try to make sure that they know that education, really in life, education is the keystone to anything, learning about what you need to know.
But I think too, I did not know that about Tommy, and that you switched doctors, which I think you could just do my job, because I tell people that all the time. If you're not happy with your doctor, if they are not having this conversation with you, and I actually spoke to about 400 doctors worldwide in August, and I told them flat out, I said, I tell people who come to me that if they are not happy with the conversation that you're not having, or that they try to initiate and you don't want to discuss, I tell people to get a different doctor. I tell them to go find someone else. Obviously, that's really hard in a rural situation or where you don't have a lot of medical care, right? But if you have that option, go find someone else. So I applaud you for bringing that up. But I think the other thing with you is, no matter where you go, you are educating doctors. Like, you go into the ER and you're like, did you know about SUDEP? This could happen to my son. You need to start taking care of him, And I'm not in that tone, but you are constantly educating physicians about this. You are constantly bringing this to light. And Teresa will message me and say, so I educated another one today.
Well, do you remember last week, I believe it was, I was on a Facebook group with this lady, put a screenshot of her daughter's discharge. Was it discharge papers or visit summary?
Yes.
And at the bottom, it literally said, discussed SUDEP, she may die. Literally, that's what it said.
And now,
I asked the lady,
not a joke, because you sent me the screenshot, and you were like, Sally, you need to see this.
Yeah, I asked the lady, could I share it with Sally? And she said, sure, I don't want to get my doctor in trouble, blah, blah, blah. And, I was cringing, trying not to say, anything about that. But I've always had that kind of attitude, and this isn't SUDEP related, and I know we need to get to the other ladies, but I'll just tell you this short story. One time, Tommy was about 8 years old, and I was working at FedEx at the time, so I was dressed in navy blue clothes, the same as the paramedics, and I was running into the hospital, and they didn't have a pediatric ICU in this hospital. I knew he'd have to be flown out. So as I'm running in with the paramedics, I'm like, he's going to need 2 milligrams of Ativan every 5 minutes up until 10 milligrams, and you're going to have to bolus him with phosphenotoin and da 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 da. And then he goes, was anybody contacted his parents? And as soon as I said I'm his mom, he balled up the paper that he was writing on and threw it in the trash. And it kind of opened my eyes that says these people don't listen to the parents. And then he's asking, does anyone know the number to the PICU at Fairfax? And I start reeling off the phone number, and I could hear the doctor on the other end, and I knew him. So I was yelling, it's Tommy, it's Tommy. And because Tommy had his own protocol. And the doctor started saying, you need to give him 5 milligrams of Ativan. So I just grabbed the paper out of the trash and handed it back to him. And I've always kind of been like that. Like, you know, he seized at Costco, and I was trying to tell the people, this was pre-cell phones. I was telling him to call 911, and the guy in front of me wouldn't get out of my way. So I just kind of tipped his card over. So he'd have to go deal with that. And I kind of do the same thing with SUDEP. And it's kind of, you have to be, in my opinion, and that's just the way I am. I don't want to say aggressive, but like, if it's a topic you don't want to, they don't want to hear, like yesterday when I testified to the House committee, I opened with, they wanted to know how it was being in the hospital. And I said, well, I hope you never have the heartbreak of a doctor looking you in the face and saying they need the ventilator for someone, your son's ventilator for someone else. And, you know, and I prefer to be blunt, because let's face it, that's what it is. And if you dance around the fear, you're never going to really talk about it. And I think for the parents that are afraid, and I'm acting like high and mighty, Sally will be like, you call me all the time, like scared to death. But on my front, in front of the doctors, I have to bring up that kind of front, like, I'm not afraid to talk about this. So let's talk about it because it's important. So.
And I feel like almost bringing it up to the doctors and you being the one that brings it to the forefront, they start paying attention more, like, oh, she knows.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, Edana,
Right.
you're shaking your head, yes.
And Sally, you did this too, right? When after Lydia, you told me that you went up to her doctor at the American Epilepsy Society meeting and said, excuse me, I need to talk to you. I mean, I think that's
I did, and I didn't do it in a confrontational way. I just said, I did exactly what Edana said. I said, I'm not mad at you. I don't blame you.
Right.
But I need to know why you never, and I even ordered my daughter's medical records to see if it was something I may have missed, because, you know, you're getting all that information and the doctor's like, well, yeah, I told you, you know, and I didn't want to discount that maybe somewhere I missed it, right? Maybe the fact that I was so overwhelmed with the epilepsy and trying to control it that I missed it. So I ordered all our medical records, and he had documented everything under the sun, maybe including what I wore to the hospital that day, but nothing about SUDEP. And I wasn't mad at him, but I just asked him, I said, why? And his answer to me was, I am here to give you hope. And I said, no, you're here to give me all the information. And he said to me, if you can solve a parent's anxiety level, I will tell them about SUDEP. He said, because that's what I deal with when I tell a parent is the anxiety level. And then the child will wake up in the middle of the night with their parents standing over them with their eyes open. And they're like, what are you doing? And the parent's like, I just want to see if you're breathing. He goes, I can't fix that anxiety. And I said, no, you can't.
You can't.
You can't. But is it fair not to tell them so that they know what they can possibly do to help their loved one? You know, and I didn't say that to him, but I just said, I said, I can't fix anxiety, but a patient and their caregiver deserve to know every single detail about that condition.
Absolutely.
Right.
And even my saying is, even though you're low risk, does not mean you're no risk.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
I know we only have like 6 minutes left. I would love to hear any. If Edana and Danielle, you were so well spoken in describing your story and just what you hope to come out of this. If you could give in 3 minutes each, if you could just give some pieces of advice to these families. Teresa, you were great. Thank you so much for giving those advice to the family to go, yeah, sometimes we're not strong, but we've got to like grab it, hold it, and do it for our loved one. But Edana and Danielle, if you could give some advice to someone knowing what you know now, what would that be? We want to walk away with these listeners and viewers to feel empowered and strengthened by us, right? So what could you give? What information could you give?
You want to go, Danielle?
Yeah, you can go. I'm
Okay,
collecting my thoughts.
Okay. Well, I would say, I'm in agreement with Teresa and you, Sally, but I'd say the main thing would be, ask your provider, whether that's a nurse practitioner, a primary care doctor, or your neurologist. Ask them about SUDEP. Because you're listening now, ask them about SUDEP. And let them know that it's okay if they don't want to talk about it, but that they should be providing information to a family. And my thing was, give me a pamphlet. Give me a pamphlet. I don't like the fact that maybe you may not have wanted to talk about it, but you give me a pamphlet on everything else. So my thing is, don't be afraid. And this goes back to Teresa. Don't be afraid to ask the doctor or the nurse practitioner about it, and let them know that that's part of their responsibility to share with you all the risk. And again, I'll just agree that, if your provider is not providing you with that information or being completely transparent, it's time to try to find another doctor. And, don't be bullied into not speaking up and asking for information, because that's a common thing with physicians too. Some of us don't want to ask them about certain things. We'll take information, but we don't want to ask them and ask for more accountability.
Well, and it's sometimes the intimidation factor, right?
Yeah.
You're the man with this big degree or the woman
Right.
with this big degree. And so you're telling me everything that I need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So eloquently said. I've known you a long time, and I'm just so proud to know you and all that you've done in Kayla's memory, and you and your husband. I know he's behind the scenes and he lifts you up. So, and we've talked together. So I just don't want to discount that he's there as well.
I appreciate that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, he's a wonderful man, and he's got a very big presence, but this soft heart. So, and he loved his daughter so much, and you can see that in his eyes and his face, and his heart is right there on his sleeve. So,
yeah, thank you.
Danielle, if you could just give some last minute thoughts about how you can empower people listening today, and what you've learned as a sibling. I think you spoke to it about, like, don't discount those siblings' feelings. But what about, anything else that you could share?
Yeah, I think, I feel like I don't have too much to add, but, asking about it and talking about it, like was said before, if you're here, you now know about it enough to ask the question. But, my other piece of advice would just be, be there for, you will be there for your loved one, but, be honest with them about what's going on, because I think that's being honest and being able to talk through this. Epilepsy is lonely for some people, that they feel like it's scary, and a looming idea of SUDEP or anything, any of us facing death is scary. So I would just say, love your loved one and cherish every minute you have with them. And I just say, hold them close, but also, like I was saying, siblings, we have different pain. Of course, it's nowhere near as a parent or a spouse or a child, but it is also a very close, I feel like I had epilepsy with my brother, and I felt like every time he had a seizure, I felt like I needed to do something about it myself. So like I said before, if I would have just known about this and been able to say, Josh, when you go to the doctor, ask your doctor about this, or let me see what I can find out for you. That I just wish that could have been what could have been done. But asking about it, doing, research, see what the SUDEP Institute is doing, get as much information as possible, because the more information you have, the better. And, I think it really will highlight the fact that making sure your seizures are controlled and that you're taking care of yourself properly will minimize that risk as well.
You're on.
One thing
You're
that
on
I just want to share from my perspective is I, of course, preach about educating yourself, asking the right questions, getting a different doctor if you need to. But one thing, and I think Teresa, Edana, and Danielle, I think you can all agree with this, is although that fear might be there, don't let it consume you, and make sure that whether it's you or your loved one, you continue to live your best life. Live your best life. When I hear Edana talk about Kayla and all that she accomplished and all that she did and how beautiful she sang, when I hear about Teresa and Tommy, that he gets to go for car rides with Nanny, or is it Nanny, to go car rides with Nanny and to see his smiling face. Danielle talking about your brother and his 2 children, and he worked and he held this job and living your best life. That is so important. You know, I partnered with Cameron Boyce Foundation, and Cameron Boyce was the Disney star who died a few years back, or a year and a half back. And his parents did not know about SUDEP. But the one thing I talked to Lydia Boyce about is that Cameron was like, when she talks about him, I'm like, he was living his best life. Like he continued to live his best life, and he did. So that is something I want you to hopefully walk away with. We cannot live in fear.
That's good.
Yeah, but that's my advice. And I know that's easier said than done, but I certainly tried to think back to my daughter, and that even though she had a rare chromosome disorder and lots of health challenges and in and out of the hospital 27 times, 25 times, I followed an ambulance almost 20 times. We continue to have her live her best life. And it was a good life with us. So I know we're up at our time. I want to thank all the ladies here and all their support systems behind them. They have men and families that support them behind the scenes. I want to thank them. But most of all, I do want to thank Gabi and the Wishes for Elliot Foundation for having this program, Deep Connections, also led by Jayetta Hecker. They're a wonderful team of women supported by their families as well that brought us here today. So I'm so thankful, and thank you for asking me to be part of this. And ladies, thank you for your time. So I will turn over to you, Gabi.
Thank you all. This was an incredible discussion. I mean, I definitely got like chills a few times, you know, and I think, you know, as a parent of a child who is very severely affected with epilepsy, definitely intractable, you know, these are the kind of things that we live with. But I think it's so important to do this kind of empowerment. And I think especially for, you know, parents who don't tend to be outspoken or, you know, who are able to advocate in the way that they always want to, that they hear from you all that you're going to, you know, the accountability for your family lies with you, even though it should be the doctors, you know, who are talking about this. And I think, especially like, you know, Teresa and I, we have children who are nonverbal, and if we don't do it, they can't. And, you know, Danielle and Edana, if your loved ones don't know about it, they can't do anything about it. So, and I think, you know, I have one of my friends, Tammy, is on the call here, and, you know, she's looking into how do we get insurance companies to cover pulse oxes for kids. You know, a lot of our kids get, you know, struggle, and they, you know, don't breathe when they have seizures. They, you know, have all these issues, and why aren't we able to get these monitors that help us prevent? So I think it's just been an incredible discussion. I thank all of you, brilliant women, for all that you do, and the love that you know, pass on to the community with all that you're doing. I just want to quickly just say that, you know, this is our first webinar of the year. We're so happy to be back with you, but we would love to hear what you want to learn about this year. So please let us know. You can email us at info@deepconnections.net. You can also find, I think a survey will pop up at the end here. Please take 2 minutes and just let us know what you think. And you can also find more about SUDEP and the SUDEP Institute on our website with this series of webinars. We're linked to Sally and to a number of other resources. So thank you, everybody. Take care. And I feel like I want to give all of you these are my hugs. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.